Picture this. It's the mid-90s, and you've been introduced to the new wave of video games where 3D graphics, the integration of polygons, and the 6 degrees of freedom that bring you, the player, into this fresh and more open world of escapism for you to indulge in. No longer are the second-dimensional bitmaps of the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis involved in the capitalist war of video game consoles, as this new era with the Nintendo 64, Sega Saturn, and PS1 have now become the hottest things on the markets. With newly developed engines and chips installed into the hardware of these consoles, composers have now been given more artistic freedom to experiment and generate scores for the next generation of gamers. Thanks to the addition of disk drives on the Sega Saturn and PS1, CD-ROMs became the new vessel for video games as they no longer required sound chips and could hold up to over 700 megabytes of data, which was 175 times bigger its size compared to a Super Nintendo cartridge. Since CDs were already so popular among the masses, this meant that gamers from all around the world would not only be promised with the highest sound quality possible, but would also be introduced to new and exciting intricacies that weren't previously seen or heard before. As the latest video game consoles are being announced, a recent trend of electronic music has also been making waves spawning from the United Kingdom and its rave scene. This genre that would eventually be referred to as jungle music would incorporate heavy nuances from the Jamaican dub and reggae movements, as well as a variety of sampling and generating syncopated drum patterns at a tempo between 160 to 185 beats per minute. Such elements that would be enough to inspire Japanese composers Soichi Terada, Yuzo Koshiro, and Motohiro Kawashima with very particular projects that would later surface into what was about to happen for the new age of gaming. With both video games and this new take on electronic music at the forefront of the mainstream at this time, these two mediums would soon form an alliance and change the world of video game music forever. This would eventually be discovered on the soundtracks to the likes of Sonic R, Ape Escape, Ridge Racer, Bomberman 64, and many more among the pantheon of 64-bit games. Now you may be wondering where I'm going with this. Well, believe it or not, this is where the genre of Vaporwave comes in. Since Vaporwave has already been known to include the 16-bit to low polygon graphics of the Sega Genesis and PS1 in the overall visual aesthetic, the sample-heavy nature of its audible counterpart has derived from a plethora of video games from those eras to encapsulate the nostalgic overtones it's known for. Some of the best examples of video game music being sampled in the genre hails from the likes of Death's dynamic Shroud with their 2014 album Derelict Mega Tower, Blank Banshee's 2012 debut, and Wave Race 64 by Trucks Passing Trucks, just to name a few. Contrary to popular belief, Vaporwave doesn't exclusively rely on samples, and instead we have seen a rise in producers become more dependent on their own intuition. Some are even willing to take pages out of the books of video game music rather than solely chop up various sections of a pre-recorded piece and reformulate it into something new, especially considering that the sample-heavy temperament of the scene has found itself become somewhat scarce in recent years, and that more artists have been pioneering their own ideas through the presets of DAWs to replicate those classic hypnagogic attributes that we all love. Some of which has been proven through labels including My Pet Flamingo, Business Casual, and George Clanton's 100% Electronica. All of which has helped see a new leaf be turned over in the community and ultimately bring a breath of fresh air to what Vaporwave might have been needing, especially since the downtempo nature of 65 to 100 beats per minute would make the inclusion of a fast-paced drum and bass loop to somehow align smoothly in the overall production. On top of that, the internet has seen a renaissance of Vaporwave and drum and bass resurface, later to be graced with millions of views through a myriad of mixes curated by content creators across YouTube, coalescing both video game music and Vaporwave in these hour-long mixes. So today we're going to take a dive and look at some of the artists that have lately broken the status quo and successfully amalgamated the worlds of Vaporwave, video game music, and drum and bass. A new microgenre that has been debated to be dubbed as Vapor Jungle, Drum and Vape, or what has recently been dubbed by the internet as Vaporbreaks. If this happens to be your first time at the channel and you enjoy deep dives into various types of music, please hit those like and subscribe buttons and feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know what you would like to see me cover next. With that out of the way, let's get into the video. Level Select by Pizza Hotline. Pizza Hotline packed a wallop of a punch in 2022 with what many deem to be one of the best examples that unites liquid drum and bass with Vaporwave. Just from looking at the album cover alone, you can immediately tell how heavy of an influence the Y2K consoles of yesteryear have had on Level Select. But what separates this record from most is that while it is still very much a Vaporwave adjacent record, Level Select puts more emphasis towards its drum and bass elements. How it implicates these notions is by making every track feel like its own level and natural environment. Such includes the opener DUALSHOCK, which warps the listener into the soundtrack's own tutorial stage to understand what's expected throughout the journey across level select, right before transporting them at breakneck speed into bangers including Dream Shell, Shadow Moses, and Emotion Engine. Thanks to its lush selection of synths, pads, and leads emanating a minimal yet effective sonic atmosphere, this record gives you that escapist feeling of the Sega Saturn opening up a portal from your TV and transporting you into a world full of polygons with the goal of you trying to find your own way out of the console and back into the IRL, only for you to hope that said portal reopens and allows you to retry for a higher score as soon as the last track snaps you back into reality. All of that being said, Level Select is the ideal soundtrack for those who want to make the fantasy of living in a 64-bit world feel all the more realistic and as though you yourself are the protagonist of your own game. I would also recommend you scope out Pizza Hotline's latest record, Polygon Island, which dropped recently on Spotify and Bandcamp, and let me tell you, it goes really fucking hard. You're welcome to give Polygon Island a listen, but I highly recommend you start with Level Select so you can see later on how much Pizza has upped his production game ever since. Strawby Computer Entertainment Europe by Strawberry Station. My boy and fellow Future Funk producer Strawberry Station has never been shy of experimentation in the last few years. Having made a name for himself through a myriad of sweet selections such as 128 Stays, Talk of the Dance Floor, and Strawberry Dreams in the Future Funk scene, Strawbs has found himself become rather enticed by drum and bass as of late. As a result, we have 2024's Strawberry Computer Entertainment Europe featuring collaborations with Mr. Wax and TikTok DJ mashup extraordinaire Snowdream. If DLCs were a thing back in the 90s, Strawberry Computer would be an Ape Escape expansion pack. This album alone could very well pass off as a genuine video game OST that its developers believe to have completely vanished and remained lost for decades, only to resurface within the confines of the internet. Despite being what seems to be uncharted territory for Strawberry Station to indulge in, his own unique sonic fingerprint from past Future Funk releases still linger fervently throughout the course of the album's length, that include his kawaii anime samples and sanguine synth patterns fluctuating throughout his MIDI clips. Strawberry Computer makes itself very apparent in providing a multifaceted sonic platter for the OG players of yesteryear and allows you to be the judge of what games work best with this LP. Strawberry Computer is a very bias-free record that emphasizes itself as a more versatile assemblage of the old school gamer's favorite soundtracks and suspends the idea of categorizing tracks for particular games and its levels to ensure a more nostalgic experience for the listener. Forgive Yourself by Luxury Noise. Stepping away from the console-centric nature of the aforementioned albums, Luxury Noise's 2023 release Forgive Yourself produces its own unique spin on what Vaporbreaks would potentially sound like if it had completely foregone the video game aesthetic and fixated on integrating the more hypnagogic rudiments with cinematic and lo-fi undertones. Forgive Yourself is best described as otherworldly, accentuating the personas that the genres of breakbeats, IDM, and jungle are known for to manipulate a more innovative approach by molding the more fundamental aspects of Vaporwave into the mix. Luxury Noise has always been one of the more experimental artists in the Vaporwave community that has never shied away from tapping their more left-of-field mannerisms into anything that piques their curiosity. And Forgive Yourself only heightens that said curiosity of theirs even further, and it shows by how consistent the track listing is throughout its course and avoids dissociating every umbrella term for what Luxury Noise alters to their liking. Imagine if Esprit.wav were to take pages out of the books of Aphex Twin, Boards of Canada, or Square Pusher, or if the Black Sapphire Club from Cyberpunk's 2077 Phantom Liberty was met with the likes of Saint Pepsi and Igloo Ghost all sauteed together. That's essentially what you'll get by listening to Forgive Yourself and everything else in Luxury Noise's catalogue. Rose Room by Donor Lens. UK duo comprised of producers Kid Neon and Love and Dust, Donor Lens returned this year with a crispy selection of singles meshed into the ever so delightfully euphoric Rose Room, showcasing a wave of digital accoutrements including drum and bass, early Y2K pop, BGM, glitch, electronica, and hip-hop alongside a variety of guest features from Jaina Tyrell, Data Girl, and Enzo Van Baelen. What makes this album even juicier is that both halves of Donor Lens have had a long-standing mutual fascination in both vaporwave and video game music. On top of that, both of their dads have apparently been involved in the video game industry, with Tom's father being a video game developer in the 90s, and Jay's dad being an avid retro gaming collector and enthusiast. Though Donor Lens have had their fair share of constructing alternative dance floor anthems, their own spin on the polygon aesthetic of the 90s through Rose Room was made purposely to resonate with the confines of a smaller sound system fit for your family room as opposed to a club's PA system. Their little twist with the mixing, however, inoculates a more bass-heavy nature that many of 64-bit games didn't capture. Given that soundtracks like Wipeout and Ape Escape were driven towards an audience that was obviously too young to go clubbing, Rose Room replicates the idea of having music from the clubs during the mid-90s in the UK be brought to the home console, allowing the listener to immerse themselves into a space that paints pictures of how it felt to go clubbing without needing to turn off your Sega Dreamcast. Innersense by 3-Piece Suites. This more left-of-field fever dream spawned from the mind of Enzo van Baelen and the aforementioned Donor Lens is quite possibly the most 90s-sounding breakbeat record you will ever hear in the Vaporwave spectrum. Innersense is what you could describe as the Crystal Method going cold turkey on Ritalin and spending a whole week playing the Nintendo 64 while having Aphex Twin on Spin Cycle in the background. Being one of the first fully fledged releases to be dubbed a vaporwaving drum and bass crossover, 3-Piece Suites presents Innersense as a more sporadic take on what Vaporwave at the time had the potential to be. A project that lifted off in 2020, this collaborative effort was seen by Enzo as what he dubbed to be Vaporave, to give the genre a chance to inhabit a more fast-paced approach to its down-tempo counterpart. The idea that Innersense tries to convey to the listener is understanding versatility without trying to force it, to decorate your canvas naturally without any contrived mannerisms that others would contrarily assume to work. Anything you initially perceive as something absurd to execute will actually turn out to be your most prodigious brainchild to date. Variability is 3-Piece Suites' bread and butter, and keeping an LP's head afloat is something that can easily go wrong if variability becomes too overbearing. Innersense, however, defies those odds and presents itself on a silver platter with a certified Michelin star. Even though all these albums I've mentioned are far from being the earliest archetypes of Vaporbreaks, they still demonstrate the potential this cutting-edge edition has to offer within the Vaporwave community. Especially since some of the harbingers of Vaporbreaks date back to St. Pepsi's Mr. Wonderful 2, and you could argue that some of James Ferraro's Farside Virtual could have had something to do with the inspiration behind these records as of late. Even the Vaporwave king himself, George Clanton, who has been influenced by 90s acid and rave music, has incorporated slow drum breaks into a fair amount of his songs, some of which have even been sampled from old 70s records and the rest being made entirely from scratch. All things considered, there's never been a right or wrong answer as to how Vaporwave is meant to be executed via one's DAW, and the idea of slapping a Narman break sample over a slow 80s funk track, transposed by a few semitones down, may not seem as far-fetched as some may have thought. All in all, what we have seen for this new umbrella term in the scene has been a really refreshing addition so far, given how much the scene has elevated over the last decade and is tampered with new ideas that would develop into new microgenres such as vapor trap, mall softs, hard vapor, future funk, and late night lo-fi, just to name a few. Vaporbreaks has already seemed to blend in with every other category so fluidly. The question is, what could possibly happen for this new off-the-cuff extension, and what current artists could we see become newfound participants? We can't say for sure at this point, but regardless of what happens next, it's going to be really exciting to see how everything turns out, and it might even inspire you to do something like this. What do you guys think? Is Vaporbreak something that Vaporwave needed? What other artists or albums in or outside of Vaporwave would you say are associated to the aforementioned records? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next video. And above all, be good to yourselves. Lots of love from your boy, Daydream Deluxe.